Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story. The demonic beast turns into a cute girl. Gospel 2, Rise of the Heavens, written by Kuji. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin Chapter 1, Third-Person POV. It had only been a few days since the failed attack, and after going through the after-incident reports they got from the bribed police officers, the two men were enjoying a cup of tea. Using these reports, All for One and Dr. Garaki had just finished deciding what kinds of Nomu they would make using the quirks they had obtained. After all, it took the good doctor a great amount of time and resources to create a powerful Nomu capable of fighting the heroes. And with the data they collected from the Nomu defeated that day, they could now experiment with as well as improve the process further to create even stronger Nomu. By the way, MSTR, there was something I was still wondering. He asked his leader, who he swore loyalty to almost a century ago. Receiving a nod of approval encouraging him to continue, the doctor spoke up again. How did you know so much about that creature when you captured it before I had even begun to study it? He asked his MSTR, which was a fair question to ask no matter how you looked at it. All for One chuckled as he pulled out of a dimensional storage quirk. He had a rather thick but tightly shut leather book. Over 200 years ago, when quirks started to show themselves, I was a young man writing a fantasy novel. It was about a girl who ate monsters to gain their powers as she traveled the world. He said, handing the book to the doctor. Dr. Garaki took the book and began flipping through it, till he stumbled upon a monster encyclopedia where he had notes and sketches of the monsters from the eventual story. In this section of the book, he spotted an almost one-to-one drawing of the creature his MSTR called Silverwing. How did you make this reality? He asked his MSTR in astonishment as they began to laugh heartily. I did not make it reality, but rather someone else did. All for One responded to his friend loyal follower, confusing them. Seeing this, he gave it a moment before he continued to respond to their question. When quirks began manifesting, someone with a quirk that opened portals SCKED. In my original book, what you are reading is a copy I made using a quirk I had taken a few decades back for its utility. He said, enjoying how the doctor was marveling over the creatures he drew, already talking about new inspirations for Noma designs. Allowing the man to enjoy himself for a few minutes, he listened to his interesting ramblings like he always did. Based on how Sally talked about her quirks, I believe that she came from the same world my book went to. On top of that, someone used it as a basis for a video game over there. Henceforth why when I used a techno quirk on the creature, I got a rather odd response from it. As though it was both made of flesh and code. I got the same sort of response from Sally as well as her friend Maple when I used it at the same time with both a long-range scanning quirk and several presence-surpassing quirks to avoid her noticing me. I swear that brown-haired girl ability to locate enemies is quite astounding. He said, finishing his high-speed rambling that only Garaki and those precious two could ever understand. Taking a few moments to digest what he had just heard, he gathered his thoughts before posing the obvious question to his MSTR. Sir, if we can track down the quirk that brought them here and likely converted them from game character data to flesh. Then with a few samples from Maple and Sally we could. He trailed off, stopping, thinking this sounded far too good to be true for him to be hearing. Yes, that is correct, though I could not track down the user. When I felt that similar flux of energy to 200 years ago, I used the same techno quirk I used to analyze Silverwing and the girls to read the energy signature. Currently I have another quirk working with it in the background of my body to analyze it, so when I do finish doing so, we can begin planning and testing this theory. All for One said, grinning, as they would have plenty of interesting things to hold them over till it was done. UA Nizu office, third-person POV. After the first few days, the third-year students by some miracle did not get pulled from the hero course, so they added the 4 remaining ones to the 3A hero course class. Then renaming the class 3AB at the insistence of the 4 surviving 3B students who wanted to honor their comrades who the 3A students agreed with. For the second-year students, among the 18 remaining 10 were pulled out by the parents, with the other 8 still on the edge of leaving. Due to the incident, he doubted that anyone would be willing to jump in and join the second-year class anytime soon. Finally came the joyful official swapping of Minoru Mineta and Hantasiro, as the parents of the new hero course student agreed to let him, albeit a bit reluctantly. The first-year hero course was miraculously untouched as none pulled out their students yet. However, many of the other parents said that they may change their minds depending on the safety measures he puts in place in the near future. Honestly, it was a surprise to the principal that most of the parents who agreed to let their students sign up for the hero course only now realized the danger. It was like they did not think heroes were actually risking their lives on a daily basis to save people. The Mineta family tried to get their son back into the hero course, but Nizu rejected him despite the threat of a lawsuit, as it would be a mockery to those who stood bravely in the face of death together. However, there were a few bright sides to this horrific set of events that had occurred that day in this country's history. Due to UA being the significantly focal target among this citywide assault, the government is now funding their complete security revamp. So unlike before, where he had to carefully allocate some parts of the budget to security in a precarious balance with the other departments, Nizu could now put everything else into the other budgets while the government gave them a nearly unlimited security fund. With this drastic difference between the previous and current budget for security, he could put together the security system his students deserved. A notion was passed recently also because of the attack, as to have the hero and support students live on campus in dorms. This was naturally shelved for now, as first they had to make sure all hero schools and government institutions were secured first, which would take some time to do. It seems the golden age of peace All Might had created is beginning to come to an end, and much sooner than expected. Nizu said aloud to himself, sipping his tea. UA support labs, third-person POV, Izuku and Mei were quite lucky that Principal Nizu allowed them to use the support course lab to fix Elizabeth. Izuku, as much as he wanted to comfort his sister at the time, had known he would just break down himself if he attempted to do so. So instead, he and Mei, who also could not stand being in the hospital for longer than the bare minimum, went to fix Elizabeth. Since her AI was still safe, they put her to sleep and transferred her to a hard drive for the time being. When he had her play the video of Maple eating the robots to shut down the AI by causing it to have a panic attack, it had luckily worked. However, it was more traumatizing than he had originally thought it could be for a computer AI. Having a complete meltdown, deleting itself, like how a person with PTSD might commit suicide when confronted by what caused them their PTSD, it ended itself. Luckily, all the information it had was backed up every night at midnight, so all the school records were intact. Unfortunately, that also meant they barely managed to recover the video footage from the main campus. Going through the list of robot parts, they saw things that were entirely separate from each other, like a metal shell that resembled a person but was missing elbow joint covers. There was an exoskeleton that was designed by Power Loader Sensei. It was meant to be worn by a human and had the same freedom of movement as any real human limbs. Though this model was never meant to be able to support a whole metal body by itself, so they had to make some major modifications to it. After that, they found a thesis paper by one of the dead third years who had an idea to make a sort of muscle for the robots that was similar to human muscles. They came up with this based off one of the robots from the hero exam. This would have allowed them to keep their higher tier of flexible movement compared to the other two but still become stronger. However, it was never completed. Even so, they added their name to the list of those who worked on their completed design to honor them, since it was due to them. They made it at all. With these in place, and the planning was done, along with the miniature prototypes for them so as to test if they worked. With that, the preparations were done within the first 2 days with no problems. The third day they began putting her together. However, what surprised him was Mei adding freckles to her. Mei, why are you adding freckles to her now that the paint job is done? He asked her, confused as to go for such a meaningless feature. Well, if we are going to make our baby look human, then we should add some features that make her looks cute like her papa, shouldn't we? She smiled innocently, asking that before going back to finishing the freckles and touching up the paint job. Izuku, who went red-faced immediately, was a bit of an embarrassed wreck for the next half hour, give or take a bit of time. After he came back to the situation at hand, they began putting her body together part by part, wire by wire, till she was done all except her hair. On the fourth day, before booting her up, they added a fake wig that was greatly accurate to real hair, to the point where you could not tell it apart from real hair. Naturally, they also made sure it was fireproof. and they decided to go for just a little below shoulder length for it as the body was designed to resemble a 5-year-old. They went with pink hair to match Mei as Izuku had insisted on giving her something that made her look like Mei as well. The two decided to go with green eyes at Mei's insistence as she liked the look in them whenever she got him talking about support gear or quirks. Izuku was once again shot through the heart metaphorically by Mei, who had an airhead fit for an anime HRM protagonist when it came to the opposite gender. "Alright, running the final diagnostic checks," he said, running it through the computer to make sure everything was functioning at 100% efficiency. Exoskeleton is synced with AI carrier. Network linking backup system is fully functioning. Cooling systems are a go. "Alright Mei, let's start Elizabeth backup now," he said as he began uploading her AI, waking her up. The network linking backup system he designed was a safety protocol that he added to the main CPU that housed Elizabeth AI. In the event that her body or CPU would be destroyed to the point where she could not survive in it, then she would access the closest network she could, usually an open one. From there she would piggyback onto one nearby to the next till she could upload herself to UA's server or his own server he made for her at both his home and Mei home. He was going to install this into her original body when he found the time, but she got damaged before he had the chance to do it. Opening her eyes, Elizabeth looked around confused as she then noticed her mother standing across from her a few feet away. "Mama!" Elizabeth called out to her in joy as she got up to run, only to trip and fall. This was when she noticed her new humanoid body. "Elizabeth, is your CPU or exoskeleton not working okay?" Mei ran up to her to check to see if she and Izuku made a mistake with their baby. She was using the longer name and not the nickname in case their precious baby was not computing at full capacity yet due to just waking up after being turned off for a few whole days. Taking a moment to access the schematic Izuku had uploaded into her CPU for her as well, she ran a self-diagnostic. "My body is functioning normally, mother, but I do not know how to balance without my tail yet. I will need to practice a bit or download new software to learn how," she said that as her father also ran up to her, hugging her. After an hour or so she learned how to walk normally in this human-shaped body, so they moved on to the other tests. That is, once Izuku got a UA track suit on her courtesy of an angry recovery girl when Principal Nizu took a break from his paperwork to relax by helping them teach her to walk without a tail. She had come with him since she wanted to check on the two of them to make sure they were not pushing themselves too hard after just getting released. When Recovery Girl had first seen Elizabeth, however, in her now extremely realistic human-looking robot body that had the AI of a little girl naked, she yelled at Izuku and Nizu. Apparently, robot or not, it was inappropriate for any girl to walk around naked in front of people. Izuku was tempted to ask her why just girls, but he did not want to find out how strong that cane of hers was. He heard the rumors about it. Or better yet, why she did not complain before when she was in her more animal-looking body. In any case, Elizabeth's AI learning curve had hit a wall, slowing it down to now regular human development levels after the sudden jump in intellect. So now they really needed to teach the mentally young girl how to properly behave and do certain things. Though things like table manners were at the bottom of the list for them, as she lived off of water for her cooling system and oil for her fire breath. When their principal inevitably went back in his office to do paperwork, and Recovery Girl went back to the nurse's office, Power Loader Sensei took a break from the last of his repair construction work to watch their tests. To pass her off as a normal-looking child, they gave her a built-in flamethrower, as Izuku's father had a fire-breathing quirk. So that way if anyone asked, they could explain she had a quirk, thereby keeping the fact she was a robot a secret. The last thing they needed was some weird inventor trying to steal their Elizabeth and take her apart. Granted, she would feel no pain even if they did. Naturally, their teacher had them add the exoskeleton and robot muscle tech to Izuku company ownership. Mei did not care if it was legally in Izuku name only or not, as she trusted her baby-making partner to share the funds with her, as she could not imagine starting her #1 support business without him. In fact, since he already had his own company, despite the fact its name was not what she originally planned for herself, they were already halfway there to becoming the #1 support company by simply existing, so she did not mind the name Green Bunny Support Studios Incorporated. All of that, and the fact that if her name was directly on it then she would need to get involved in every major business meeting. She wanted to leave that up to Izuku as much as possible, as she hated paperwork with a passion as big as her passion for inventing. When they tested her flamethrower, Elizabeth had almost set the room on fire as she miscalculated the power output in her excitement. This AI was so human it was downright terrifying to power load her that it took Izuku less than an hour to make it. In any case, before they could grab a fire extinguisher, Izuku had frozen the area, putting out the flames, shocking them all. This was when they had discovered that Izuku had gained an ice quirk after the fight. The next day was when they told the teachers about it and what Izuku saw in his dreams. Naturally, Izuku focused on training his quirk for the sports festival, while Mei focused on making him their gear for it to show off what their company could do to the heroes of the world. Mustafa's Cemetery, third-person POV. There was still 2 weeks till the sports festival begun due to the delay, otherwise Izuku would have rushed to come by here before the sports festival to say hello to his mother. With him was Mei and Elizabeth, along with Himiko, Maple, Midnight, and Mirko. Mei was normally not good at this kind of stuff, but she could even tell when someone needed emotional support. Carrying the flowers for him on the way there, as they both held one of Liz's hands each, she passed them to Izuku so he could place them. His 2 adoptive mothers each placed a bouquet of flowers each as well, to show respect to the mother who raised him for years till they took him in. Maple was keeping her promise to Inko and was carrying tissues for him ready to offer them at a moment's notice if he needed them. However, when they got there was already a bouquet of flowers, so Izuku assumed Aunt Mitsuki had dropped them off despite her own problems right now. Inko, who was watching from behind Izuku, thanked Maple for bringing flowers to her grave, telling her how she was glad both her husband and son clearly missed her. Maple, as always, would never tell anyone she saw her, just letting Izuku have his moment in front of his mother grave. Chapter 2, Third-Person POV. Even from the waiting rooms that were put together for each class, the students could hear the roaring of the crowds outside wanting to see the first years who survived unscathed. Though the public was treating them like they were the best of the best, in truth they were the bottom of the barrel. The only reason they survived was that their seniors who died to protect them, not because they were exceptionally skilled or more powerful than their seniors. As such, the cheers of the crowd wanting to see the 40 of the hero students who they expect to all rise to the tops of the hero world felt like thousands of knives cutting into their ears. Todoroki, who was some of the few who could keep up a poker face or ignore the cheers of the crowd, walked up to Maple and Himiko, getting everyone's attention. Mina naturally walked up beside him as she was still trying to get him to open up more to the rest of the class while they were waiting to go out into the field. Usajiyama, Toga, you two will be great heroes, as such I consider you and your little brother my rivals. Unfortunately, he is with his class instead of here in the hero course where he should be, so you will need to tell him for me after the first event. Todoroki said to them, surprising them, though not in a bad way. Thank you for that. Most people never acknowledged his dream as a hero growing up. Himiko said, as she was happy to see Izuku getting recognized for his bravery. No matter what their quirk, it means nothing if they are too afraid to fight. I am not foolish enough to underestimate someone based off their quirk status alone. So, I expect all 3 of you to give me your all when I beat you. He said, making it hard to tell whether he was actually looking down on them or not due to his extremely dull tone. Maple simply took his challenge at face value, returning it with a smile of her own. Don't worry about me holding back, I am going to give this my all. She said in almost her original overzealous and cheery tone from before the UA attack. Still, the declaration from Todoroki did get the 2 girls pumped up for the battle to come, which Maple as usual was infectious with her attitude. Thanks to this, the mood of the room had gone way up compared to before Todoroki spoke up. Mina of course was playful, scolding Todoroki, making everyone wonder why she was hanging out with him at all, as they were complete opposites. All students proceed to the West Tunnel and wait for your individual class cues in the previous order you were told. An announcement said as it came over the PA system. All right everyone, it is time to line up and it is almost time to go out there. Momo said, getting everyone to follow her, forming 2 lines with Yui beside her in front of the other line. Waiting anxiously as the other classes were practically staring holes into their backs, they were hoping to be called out by present Mike. In years past the other classes would have felt jealous of them enough to stare at them like this, but this year it was not out of jealousy. It was instead out of nervousness of the crowd excitement to see the current hero students, adding more pressure on the general education students than usual to do well. UA Sports Festival Arena Center Field, third-person POV, clearing his throat. Present Mike then switched on his mic ready to declare the start of this show, that for once he agreed with Izawa about not doing. Though his friend's point of not advertising their student weaknesses was one that made plenty of sense to him, usually it lost to the main point of this sports festival, which was for the students to attract internships for which to learn from and build up connections for themselves for when they finally graduate. However, after the last attack he agreed for once with his friend that he did not want to give the enemy any more chances to study the students. Even so, this show must go on, as twisted as. Alright folks, are you ready? Get this thing started as much as me. He shouted, for once faking his excitement. Fortunately, since none could see his horrible poker face, no one realized he was faking it. The crowd let out their own roaring cheer in response. I can't hear you. Present Mike shouted again, making them cheer louder than they were doing before to keep up appearances. First off, introducing the referees for today, as always, Midnight, who we no longer need to worry about trying to get one-on-one time with a student anymore, and the ever-stoic Cementos. He said, laughing at the protest from Midnight for that call out to how he introduced her despite it being known now how she tied the knot with Mirko. The crowd also chuckled with him here and there at his joke, though mostly due to Midnight reaction to it. With my colleagues taken care, now it is time for the students. First up is our two hero courses, who I know you all have been dying to see since this morning. The ones who with the aid of their upperclassmen and managed to protect the other students. Give it up for classes 1A and 1B, Present Mike said as the two classes took this signal to walk out into the field. Still slightly displeased by the fact people were cheering for them. Still like they were the only heroes, not once hearing someone in the crowd say anything about their upperclassmen. Though it did help relieve them that Present Mike had made sure to mention their now deceased upperclassman contribution in protecting the others. So, it was not as bad as they first thought it was going to be, walking out to the crowd that seemed to have forgotten this important fact. As always, the business course students are managing stalls you can visit during the breaks or the events themselves. But do not worry for their safety, folks. We have tripled the security detail of heroes today, so even just outside these arena walls they will be safe, surrounded by pro heroes. Present Mike told them as he showed current time video footage of them outside managing their stalls. The few who were not busy dealing with customers who came to watch from the jumbo screens outside waved to the cameras trying to promote their stalls. With that, here comes the general education courses, of 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F, 1G, and finally 1H, come on out kids and show them who the hero courses are gonna have to fight through today to claim victory. Especially you 1E, make your homeroom teacher, by that I mean me, proud. He said, making sure to encourage his class as he knew with absolute certainty how capable some of those kids are thanks to gym class. The students of his class were a bit red in embarrassment as the other students from the other general education classes looked at them a bit envious at the reminder their homeroom teacher was a pro hero as notable as Present Mike. It was a good thing though that he encouraged them, as the cheers went down a whole other decimal when they had come out. Cheers nonetheless, but the difference between them and the hero course students was depressingly obvious. Finally, coming from the support department is 1I, the only class with 40 students in one room, as well as is filled with the brave students who support the heroes both off and as of recently on the battlefield. Present Mike said, with Izuku and Hatsum taking the lead, walking their class out to the once again cheering crowd. Among them there was a brown-haired mechanic and a pink-haired woman with a certain robot child between them waving to her parents among the support course students. Now normally only the first placer in the first-year student hero entrance exam would give the athletic oath. But instead, we will give that honor to the top of our graduating third years. Mirio Togata. Present Mike declared as few moments later said student popped out of the ground beside Midnight on the podium in his hero costume. Hey there everyone, Lemillion is here to represent the third and second years not holding their own festival days this year. He said, giving them a thumbs up as the crowd got excited again after their brief moment of confusion. After all, anyone who knew of UA also knew of Lemillion, Sir Night Eye's sidekick, who Sir Night Eye himself was once All Might's sidekick. So needless to say, he was quite popular, already predicted due to his loose affiliation with All Might and his exploits. I know that things have been rough lately. But that is why we must encourage all the first years to become the strongest version of themselves they can. That is why we need to push them all to go beyond plus ultra. Mirio screamed the last two words, getting everyone to repeat UA motto with him matching his excitement. After giving the crowd a few minutes to calm down, Midnight cleared her throat and cracked her WHP to get all their attention. All right, my darlings, as much as the MSTRS of the hero world enjoys you all screaming out in excitement for her, she is going to need you all to calm down for the explanation of the events to come. Okay, she said, giving a wink to the drone recording her as she leaned forward to give the audience a peek at the top of her cleavage. The men and women alike gulped in the audience, getting caught off guard as they had subverted their expectations for her antics due to present Mike's earlier speech. Era now that you naughty boys and girls in the audience have calmed down, here is a breakdown of the first event. It will be a 4-part obstacle race going straight, then halfway there will be a turnaround through an area of fake trees back to the start going through the other 2 obstacles. Remember that you can only cross the finish line on the other side of the divide where those last 2 obstacles are. Midnight said, making everyone who remembers the last few obstacle races, wondering why they added a 4th and changed the usual route around the stadium. There will be no attacking other competitors directly with your quirks or support gear, and first 64 to pass the finish line moves onto the second round. Teamwork is encouraged but not forced, as there are both solo heroes and hero teams out there in the field. The students have 15 minutes to get ready and line up at the starting line. She told them, seeing them already begin to stretch themselves out. UA Sports Festival Racetrack, third-person POV. From the moment President Mike shouted the word go, it was, for lack of a better term, a free-for-all of shoving, trampling each other. There was however a rather cold start as Shoto Todoroki and Mina Ashido got an immediate lead on everyone else. Todoroki, when he froze the other competitors in place as he slid forward on a wave of ice, Mina was clinging to him at the time. As a result, he dragged her with him by accident. "Sorry Ashido, did I hurt you?" Todoroki asked her, not realizing she had been holding him when he made his move. "No worries, I'm fine. But I thought I told you to call me Mina," she said, pouting at the end, reminding him of what she had been telling him for the past 2 weeks. "Sorry, Mina," he said as she smiled at him, nodding in agreement at finally hearing him call her by her first name. Looking ahead, he could see a sizable army of robots. Along with looking back, he saw people catching up to them despite his burst of ice at the start. "I have an idea on how to slip past the robots quickly to avoid fighting them too much. But it might put a strain on you, is that okay?" Todoroki asked her as she had given him a vigorous nod in response. "Lay it on me to do," she said, getting excited at how fun this was going to be with his ice and her acid. "I will make a block of ice and use a wave of ice to push it forward at first. Once your acid melts free the chunk we will be standing on, we will continue to pick up speed, sliding forward as I continue to reinforce it so your acid does not break it with us still riding on it," he told her as she was practically vibrating now. "Ice surfing on a wave of acid. Hell yeah," Mina declared, pumping her pink fists in the air as she got in a position for to wrap his non-ice arm around her waist. With a bit of reluctance, he did so, and soon they went at breakneck speeds past the first obstacle. UA Sports Festival Arena Center Field, third-person POV. The crowd went nuts when they saw the son of the number 2 hero bind his opponents without directly attacking them. Normally zero is a bad thing, but this Sub-Zero start was quite the cool display to begin the first event with. "Just ask the other students." President Mike said. Bad joke aside, he was not wrong. This defiantly got the crowd excited to see how they would tackle the first obstacle, though they were a bit surprised to see the son of Endeavor working together with someone. "Oh my dear viewers, it looks like to me the Ice Prince of the Todoroki family is teaming up with the Acid Queen of UA herself. Even so, how will they tackle the first obstacle known as Robo Inferno?" He said, getting the people who were unsure before of seeing the Son of Endeavor team up with someone now excited for this tag team. Midnight, however, was hugging herself in excitement, muttering about hot-blooded youth and the slippery slope of passion that was love. Samantha simply took a few steps away, as he made a mental note to ask Mirko for a favor later. If she could spare an hour or so for her wife, if he could get them to turn off the security cameras in a room. Though he did have to admit, young Ishido and young Todoroki would make a cute couple given how shy he was compared to how outgoing she was. Aizawa let out a sigh as he decided to make sure everyone's expectations were more realistic of the first obstacle. As much as I want to say they are mentally prepared for this, they may still find a moment of hesitation within themselves when they confront the zero-pointers leading the robot army. He said, dumping a bucket of cold water on many who booed him for it. Though he really did not care, as what he said was the truth of the matter, plain and simple. I only said it was a possibility, so as to make sure the audience does not get unrealistic exceptions and boos the children who still cannot move forward from the previous mass villain attack. Aizawa said, remembering his own sports festival and how he was booed for nullifying the opponent's quirk, then beating them with martial arts in a rather bland quirkless fight as far as the audience was concerned back then. In fact, this was the only reason it took him 2 sport festivals to get into the hero course, as Nizu had yet to become principal at the time. His predecessor wanted to get UA attention by letting in only flashy quirks into the hero course. However, after coming in the top 3 2 years in a row, coming in second when he beat the top hero student in the second year before losing in the final battle. It would have been odd, or rather the principal had no excuse as to why he couldn't be moved up to the hero course, that is, unless he had wanted to risk his parents suing them at the time for quirk discrimination. Even if it would have been only to line their wallets in the end if the principal said no again. Well said, Eraserhead, and it looks like. Well, forget choosing between fight or flight, they chose both when facing the robots. Present Mike said as the scene before almost everyone made their jaws drop at the sight of it. UA Sports Festival racetrack, third-person POV, racing off on a chunk of ice. Mina had unleashed her acid to their sides but aiming a bit further ahead so when they pick up speed it would not fall back on them or miss the ice. As a result, they slide forward approaching the small army of robots, with Mina using their body weight to shift them from left to right slightly as needed. This allowed them to slip in between the 1, 2, and 3 pointers with relative ease. Naturally breaking some in the process as they moved forward, then it was looming in front of them, the 0 pointers. Unsure how to get past them, Todoroki decided to put himself in Maple's shoes to try and figure out what to do. After all, a big move would wear him out faster by causing frostbite, and they still had 3 obstacles after this one to complete. If only he could fly like that ice bird, they fought back at UA, fly. Looking up at the 0 pointer, he thought that maybe they did not have to fly. Mina did call this surfing, didn't she? I have an idea, but there is a downside. He told Mina quickly as they were approaching the target. What is the downside? She asked him, worried for a moment. It was inspired by both you and Maple, so it will be really crazy if we actually pull it off. Todoroki told her, causing her to smile ear to ear. Let's do it then. Team Tana is going to win this. Mina said, making up a team name on the spot for them. I do not know why you combined my nickname and your first name, but we are going to beat them, so hold on and keep up that energy. He told her that, as she had to resist shaking her head slightly at this dense but still cute and kind ice boy. Letting out a sudden albeit small burst of ice under them as he took over her steering, as the ice formed sort of curved ramp going upward from right to left. Flying up, Mina shot acid on the spot of the arm where they would land, while he reinforced the ice they were on. Going up the arm using their momentum, they slid across the face of the 0 pointer, destroying it, while also flying over the wall, diving the 2 sides, skipping both the second and third obstacles with relative ease. This maneuver was missed by their classmates who were either too far behind them or were not looking up as they had to focus on the 0 pointers in front of them. In fact, the trail of watered-down acid and the melted arm face of 1 0 pointer that had stopped moving made them think the 2 were now at the second obstacle already. UA Sports Festival Arena Center Field, third-person POV, the crowd and teachers alike were shocked by what they saw, as the two teens had skipped literally 2/3 of the first event like it was the expected thing to do. Aizawa however figured this idea was born from Maple's creative influence on her classmates, making him groan at the sight. Endeavor and Nizu were on the same page however, both overjoyed to see the two students clear such a thing. Endeavor more solely for his son, however that girl was definitely sidekick material in his eyes for his son. Perhaps I should extend an invitation after the sports festival for an internship to her. He pondered this out loud as his two sidekicks who accompanied him today were in silent agreement after seeing how well she supported him in that fight. Nizu from his seat was cackling like a madman at the sight of the two students defying all logic to claim an overwhelming victory together. And here I was worried the boy would refuse teamwork like his father. Perhaps Maple's presence is to thank for this development as well. Nizu mused to him after he had calmed down. IUH. Is this even allowed? Eraserhead. Present Mike asks this friend thoroughly confused as to what to do here. The crowd was also unsure as it had dawned on them the two students had just skipped half of the race using that impressive move they loved seeing. Technically speaking that did not break any rules as we never said they could not skip any obstacles. We just figured there was no way anyone would try to fly over the wall with the robots right there, ready to attack them. If they get past the robots the third obstacle would have prevented them from flying over the wall, so we simply did not think this could realistically happen. Aizawa said, basically giving this strategy the green light as they could not punish the students, nor he felt they should for them pulling off such a strategy. Well, you heard it here folks. Those two little heroes just made it to the last obstacle with almost all of their stamina intact like a couple of pros. Present Mike said as the crowd exploded in cheer at now getting a sneak peek at the last obstacle for the students. That being said folks, looks like this race just took a turn from the most extreme form of surfing this hero has ever seen to this day. To a race to decide the fastest among the animal kingdom. He said as the most likely next passing group of competitors had made it to the robot inferno. Hopefully these kids won't do any stunts that will almost make his heart stop like Todoroki and Ishido did. Chapter 3 UA Sports Festival Racetrack, Third-Person POV. The first ones to break through the ice trap of Todoroki was led by Maple, who used her fire breath to thin out the ice by melting it, along with Pony, who used her horns to break the ice. Just like with the quirk evaluations, these girls were enjoying themselves, but this time racing at around half of maximum speed since they really needed to save their stamina this time. This did not stop the girls from being more than fast enough to get a sizable lead of 10 car lengths between them and the next pair. Behind them was Himiko Toga, who was running on all fours in her rightfully dubbed cat mode, that was possible now thanks to One for All empowering her. As if acting like multiple extra brains, the mental strain on her when using this technique that had previously caused her to go into an almost feral cat state after a few minutes at best was almost gone. Almost being the keyword, as if she used it long enough it would cause her to mentally become a cat again, something Bubble Girl took too much pleasure in when using her quirk to play with her in that state. Beside her trying to pass her and catch up to the leads was One B's very own Beast Boy Jirota Shishida going all out to keep up with her. Though if his growling barking and her hissing meowing was any indication, his quirk animalistic features were definitely some kind of dog, despite some people in his previous school mistaking him for an orangutan quirk. It was also resulting in Present Mike watching this literal cat and dog fight currently dying of laughter as he was beginning to lose the ability to breathe from laughing so hard. Fortunately for Aizawa, his friend, intense laughter caused their less than 100% healed injuries to flare up, causing them pain for the trouble they were causing his ears. Further behind the two of them by about 6 car lengths was Tsuyu Azui, hopping at top speeds going over the literal potholes the front four were making as they ran on all fours. Beside her on the left was Mizo Shoji, who broke out of the ice with ease where she had instantly avoided it earlier. Slamming his fists into the ground, he would then swing himself forward. Then when he landed he would bring his arms back, bending his knees at the same time swinging his legs back. Then as he went forward he would swing his arms and legs forward, slamming his arms down in the process. Doing this over and over again, he was using his massive arm strength to propel him forward in great strides in an endless CYCL of continued motion. Though he was faster than most, his bulky body still made him slower than most others, so he adopted a similar technique to how monkeys and gorillas swing from trees. This allowed him to keep up with the front, as before UA would never go this far knowing people would ridicule him even more for being a mutant. But seeing Maple, Himiko, and other students do so without a second thought, he decided to stop holding himself back, now doing whatever it took to win, within some reason still. Then finally on Tsuyu Ajui's right side was Tokoyami, deciding to use the sports uniform shirt as a makeshift cloak to allow Dark Shadow to float above the ground, essentially flying. UA Sports Festival Arena Center Field, third-person POV. After taking a few minutes to recover from his pain that came from aggravating his injuries like an idiot, Present Mike went back to his mic. "Alright folks, this clash of speed amongst the animal kingdom is really kicking off now. At the front with a significant lead is the big lizard and the horse, with potentially the cat or dog catching up to them. Will the two furry and one of them being more desirable petting than the other participant, believe me I speak from experience, catch up to the lead racers?" Present Mike said, remembering when he tried to pat the 1B student head a while back to almost get backhanded by the normally gentle scholar. Though he did not love cats nearly as much as Aizawa, even he had to admit that petting Himiko in cat mode was the most relaxing therapy he has ever had. Until Mirko and Midnight kicked him off of the staff room couch to take their turn petting their daughter. "Hey Mike, I would not count out the remaining 3. Aizawa said as he squinted at the students bringing up the rear, unable to see completely clearly due the dust Shoji was kicking up. I know. Bringing up the rear is the octopus, frog, and the birds of darkness. Though the little froggy lady is a little slow, she should start to pick up speed once she warms up from the sudden chill everyone got earlier." Present Mike said, pointing out how Tsuyu was starting to recover her strength with her body temperature. If her current pace or recovery kept up, the two teachers would have no doubts that she would catch up with Himiko Toga and Jiroda Shishida soon enough. This was when Present Mike also noticed what his friend was noticing, as a certain individual came into view in a rather new form, as well as wincing a moment later. "Is that Izuku Midoriya flying up to the front of this mixed pack of animals? Ow, that had to hurt. Looks like the age-old question has finally been answered, people. Ice Chicken beats Shadow Chicken any time." But not just him, even the other two were taken down a notch by his He asked in surprise, as all he knew was that the kid gained an ice quirk from eating the bird. Then freaked out when Mirko kicked a fire extinguisher through the announcer booth window. "Call my son a chicken again, and the next time I kick a security robot through that window, jackass." Mirko shouted at him while flipping the bird at him for even possibly implying her son was a coward. Fortunately for him, Vlad King had managed to pull her back into the hallways where she could not throw stuff at him. Aizawa also made sure to smack the voice hero across the back of his head as well for calling a hero student a chicken, even if it was just a worse than usual joke. And if there was one thing Aizawa knew, it was how bad his friend Humor normally was, and today there was definitely something off about them and the jokes they were making. UA Sports Festival Racetrack, third-person POV. Tsuyu Ajui was originally in trouble with her limbs previously stiffened due to Todoroki's earlier ice attack on everyone earlier in the race. Due to the shaking from Shoji's choice of movement, Tsuyu was barely able to keep up with the two boys beside her without tripping. But now that she felt she had enough strength back into her limbs, she was getting prepared to time her leap to start getting a lead on to catch up to those in front. However, as she was about to do so, an icicle shot past her head, landing a good distance in front of the three. The light flashing off of it blinded her temporarily, so all she could tell was that Tokoyami, or rather his quirk, made some sort of screeching noise before falling and rolling behind her. Shoji was blind for only less than a second as he grew another eye to see the hard fall as Tokoyami quirk was sent retreating back into him, causing the bird-headed classmate to fall. Izuku, when Todoroki initially froze the ground, had to make icicles harder than the ice Todoroki had frozen the ground over with. Fortunately for him, once he was chipped to freedom, he just had to transform to his smaller bird form to catch up to the others. Unlike Maple, who had only two options of go full size for 5 minutes before losing control, or going half transformation, he had a third option. It was like his larger full bird form, but it was like the size of her half transformation, making him an 8-foot tall from beak to talon bird. But unlike Silverwing where it was white, he was a bright green while the green parts were now white on him, basically making it an inverted color to the original. This third form that was between the half transformation and full transformation was a best of both worlds scenario, so to speak. As it gave him a compact size similar to that of a half transformation but allowed him to do the large-scale attack similar to his full-sized form, unlike his sister who had to choose between the two. Though this did come with a longer time limit than the full form, he would eventually snap, and the destructive instincts of his animal form would kick in. Though H did not know why, he was able to unlock this third form due to being native to this world and not the world Maple had come from. Due to his incredibly high INT stat, he was able to use it for a longer PRD than he normally would be able to as well. Catching up to 3 students as he flew past the other students who had already freed themselves before him but after them, he made his move. Launching an icicle ahead of the 3, it blinded the girl with the frog quirk from 1B, along with his sister classmate Shoji, but for not as long. Then his real target was Tokoyami, who was the only one who could attack him as he passed by without losing speed. His plan worked as the light forced Dark Shadow to retreat into his partner body, causing them to fall rolling back behind him. Once he caught up to the other 2 almost immediately, he unleashed a small blizzard spell using a small portion of his MP pool, instantly slamming Tsuyu with her cold weakness. This caused her muscles to stiffen on her, resulting in a fall forward, but fortunately for her no rolling, unlike Shoji who instantly slipped on the just as instantly frozen ground. A surprise meeting with Izuku confused the 2 students tied for second currently as he once again unleashed that same blizzard spell, rocketing forward ahead of them. Once again, the instantly frozen ground making the 2 almost lose their foot instantly. Suddenly he had found himself with not 1 but 3 new skills, along with the one he got during training, so he looked as he flew by using his beak to tap the screen, and these really could not have come at a better time. The previous skills he obtained during his training were Water Magic V as well as Water Manipulation, which the first required him to gain the first 4 levels of Water Magic obviously. To get the first level he had to use 50 water spells in order to get it according to the unlock condition. As for Water Manipulation, it was a simple skill that he needed to gather the moisture in the air to make regular ice. Skill, MP Boost, S, MP plus condition, use a total of 250 spells. Skill, MP cost down, S, MP cost of skills are reduced by 7%. Condition unlock by getting a total of 5 levels in any of the 6 elemental magics. Skill, MP recovery speed boost, S, MP recovery rate plus 5%. Condition recover a total of 200 MP over time. To say these were ridiculously overpowered considering his build was high INT, that as far as he could tell after talking about it with Maple concluded that it boosted magic attacks. He also had suspected that Sally had these same if not better, after reading their affects and how he got them. But right now, he had to focus on the sports festival, letting them know about his suspicions of Sally abilities could wait till after this sports festival was done. Principal Niza no doubt would see this kind of revelation coming after finding out about his water magic skill he unlocked during training. Using his blizzard spell again once he was above Maple and Pony, he sent them both sliding back on the belly's faces. It seemed Pony hooves were no better for running on ice than a pair of human feet, as a result she joined his cold-blooded sister behind him. Each use of the small blizzard spell he was using to boost his speed suddenly cost a negligible amount of MP thanks to these new skills, so now he could be much less conservative than he originally thought he would need to be. Reaching a chasm filled with pillars connected by wires, he made sure to aim a few low-costing icicle spells at the ropes. Since they were stronger than his water manipulation skill, he used to make icicles normally. He figured they would cut through the ropes, which a few did. But quite a few also missed, as well as he was not used to aiming in his bird form yet. Luckily, he managed to damage a few more by using his talons as he descended then rose without compromising his speed. UA Sports Festival Arena Center Field, third-person POV, and claiming third place so far in this event. Izuku Midoriya has reached the chasm. Present Mike said just before Izuku unleashed his plan. So, when Izuku did unleash it, well, out of the 2 announcers, one was grinning his signature creepy smile while the other was slack-jawed in shock. What is he doing? he exclaimed as he saw the kid just limit the amount of people who could get across at one time even more. Turning to his friend, he saw them grinning for once, now understanding how they felt whenever they did something to get slapped upside the head. Maybe he should hold back a little bit more often from now on. Why do you look like you are about to start laughing? The kid had just cut down the action with those ropes. Present Mike scolded his friend in a very unusual turn of events, surprising not just the audience who knew of their yearly banter at this event but their colleagues as well. Because Mike, that kid is being logical and twisting the rules to his advantage. Too many focus on their quirks and looking heroic like how the public wants them to, like the idiots they are. Aizawa said, causing the audience to boo at him, that is until he sucked on the recording of Present Mike from a hot pepper eating challenge. If you want to boo me for speaking the truth so badly, then imagine a hero failing to save your loved ones because they did not do everything they could to save your loved ones, but decided to put on a show for the crowd of civilians instead by trying to look cool like you all want to see. He said, practically dumping a bucket of cold water on the stadium audience. Both civilians and heroes alike were silent. Many heroes had remembered how they failed to save someone because they felt they needed to do it in a way that looks heroic. For the civilians, they could not help but imagine their loved ones dying cause their favorite hero refused to do something that wasn't considered heroic by everyone else around them. Present Mike himself even started to feel depressed at the thoughts his colleague had put into everyone's heads at his rather vitriol words. Turning to his friend and putting a hand on their shoulder, they pleaded with their eyes to convince the man to say something to fix it. With a sigh, Aizawa turned his mic back on, getting the crowd's attention. That being said, it is a hero job to save people's lives above all else, and that means doing whatever it takes to save them, underhanded or not. Besides, for anyone who truly wants to be a hero and put their lives on the lines for others, a torn rope will not be enough to stop them here. He said, indicating to Present Mike to get back to it as the competitors were beginning to approach the chasm. All right folks, you heard the hobo cosplayer. It will take more than a little ice to stop them, just look at the screens and you will see. Present Mike said, getting a glare from his friend when they called them a hobo cosplayer, but in his opinion the man deserved it for ruining the mood. If it was not for his lack of ability to explain complex tactics and the more technical aspects of people's quirk, then he would not need a person who hates the sports festival with every fiber of their being beside him in the announcer booth. Maple, why did you have to outdo your brother in making it more difficult for other people? Are you trying to kill your other competitors? He shouted, almost wanting to pull his hair out, as now it was near impossible to even approach it, let alone go through it. Though he obviously knew the question to his answer, it did not stop him from getting worried about the students. Unfortunately for them, Nizu told them to back off from fixing the flames and gas leak issue, as he wanted to see how the students overcame such an obstacle. UA Sports Festival Race Track, third-person POV, reaching the chasm. Maple and Pony tackled it in rather unique applications of their quirks. Pony, controlling four horns, had planted her hand and feet on one each as she flew over the chasm. Maple attempted to use a concentrate form of her fire breath as a sort of pogo stick to launch herself to the first platform. However, she neglected to think of how well the ground would resist her concentrated fire. Needless to say, her plan failed, and she fell down as her flames continued to burrow ever more downwards, into a gas line. The explosion from it sent her flying over the chasm, completely catching up to Pony instantly. While this was going on, the chasm began filling with gas and blue flames, making it hard to breathe between the intense heat, smoke, and smell of gas in the air around the pillars. The only upside was that this defrosted the ropes. However, those ropes were also metallic, so that meant they also conducted heat while becoming too hot to hold to climb across for most. When the others made it there, however, they could not wait, or second guess, as other people were catching up to them. Thanks to, you guessed it, Maple destroying a good chunk of the robot army when she went through there. Himiko, who had a good sense of balance, took a deep breath and ran across the thin metal ropes almost like a ninja. Shishida, thankful he was still covered in frost, as unlike Himiko who jumped back in time earlier, he was directly hit by the blizzard. Grabbing a rope with tears in it and several others torn, he did a quick calculation before deciding his plan to move. Taking a deep breath, he jumped, grabbing the partially damaged rope, using his claws to cut it. Using his superior strength, he swung from pillar to get to the other side, narrowly avoiding getting caught on fire a few times. I knew UA said they would be tougher on us from this point forward, but this is ridiculous. The young man thought, not realizing this was all Maple doing, instead blaming it on the teachers or more specifically Principal Nizu. Tsuyu after a minute by the chasm was warmed up, and simply jumped from pillar to pillar with one large leap each. Tokoyami due to the smoke blocking out the sun and the flames below him their light not reaching him effectively thanks to the smoke was able to boost Dark Shadow strength to almost maximum power. This caused him to instantly smash apart the entrance to the fake trees with Dark Shadow when they landed on the other side before they returned to normal. Shoji, due to his naturally high healing factor simply endured the pain and climbed from usable rope to usable rope jumping from pillar to pillar upon occasion. When the other students got there, well other than the support course students with their gear most could not get through quickly if at all. Naturally those who could fly or withstand heat got through rather quickly, while the others had to make temporary alliances to get through it in one piece. A certain pink-haired student from the support course in particular, was prepared for this thanks to Izuku warnings, as she unleashed her mini-robot army to form a bridge. Alright Elizabeth Fives do your thing for mommy. Protocol Bridge. May shouted as she took out of her backpack 15 spheres the size of softball. Much less complicated than her actual original body they could handle simple orders, and Protocol Bridge was one of them. Unfolding from ball form to robot lizard form like some sort of armadillo they formed a bridge by connecting to one another, for which she walked on them quickly. Then going from the very back onward they would climb over one another to her from the side of the pillar, had repeated this process. May also made sure to put on her air-filtering cooling mask Izuku helped her make before she climbed into the fiery smoky hell that she suspected his sister had made. Elizabeth from the stands was getting excited to see that she could still help her mother from afar through her original design. Mirko and Midnight, however, were barely holding back cringed smiles at the completely opposite hells their son and daughter had unleashed on the students for the second and third obstacles. Which because of them being on two completely different ends of the temperature spectrum made the transition even more rough. Well for those who do not have body heat preserving armor like Maple who was wearing it today. Chapter 4, Third Person POV, Izuku after making it over the fake trees had come face to face with a rather impossible obstacle for him. Maybe I should have flown over the wall at the start where the robots were. He asked himself out loud as he took in the sights before him. This place unfortunately for him was essentially a no-fly zone as it was a chasm like the other previous one. Except it had multiple walking paths made of cement, one zigzag, another wavy like snake, and 3 that were straight. But something told him all 3 kinds had traps on them, and between was literal tornadoes, some blowing upwards while some scked you down. It seemed they were connected as he shot a few icicles into the ones skiing in air to see them get launched by the ones blowing upward. Though he could simply walk across one of the paths he decided it was too risky to leave himself up to the mercy of whoever designed what traps these were definitely littered with. Here comes the big one then. He said to himself as he unleashed the strongest ice attack he had, freezing everything below the paths. Draining half of his current MP to do so, nothing short of maple fire could melt it before the first event was over. With the raging winds momentarily stopped he began flying over one of the straight paths in case the wind went back on before he finished crossing. Using a boost with his blizzard spell he just cleared it in time to see the tornadoes becoming connecting blizzards. The ground itself begins to collect frost after not even a minute had passed. Deciding he did not want to deal with the angry mob of students for how he froze both obstacles he hurried along to the final obstacle. Noticing a rack of keys with instructions to take one he grabbed a key before moving on to the final obstacle. UA Sports Festival Arena Center Field, third-person POV, oh folks look like our little ice falcon won't be able to fly his way through this one. And it looks like he understands this too based off his test with the icicles he fired into those whirling winds. Present Mike said happily that for once someone from that family will not be able to go overboard for once. Seriously, what was the kid going to do, freeze the wind itself into stopping? He was about to laugh at the absurdity of his own inner joke when, as if reading his mind, his friend spoke up. How many times do I have to tell you not to test fate by saying and thinking stuff like that? Aizawa told him as he could roughly guess his noisy friend's inner thoughts. They probably thought that Midoriya, who was used to flying as his main mode of moving so far, would be slowed down by this. But if there was one thing he learned over the years, especially since meeting Maple that day, it was to never underestimate what someone could do, and like he thought Midoriya had proven them wrong by every possible measure. He actually froze the wind so hard that it stopped. Present Mike shouted as he practically pressed his face against the glass of the announcer booth. Mirko and Midnight meanwhile were laughing in joy at seeing how strong Izuku has become with his powers in such a short time after getting them. To be more specific, he froze the machines in the bottom of the pit that generated the powerful winds, you idiot. And judging by the looks of it, just upgraded this obstacle for the other contestants while he was at it. Aizawa said in a deadpan tone like usual for the first half of what he said. His voice picked up a little in excitement when he noticed what Midoriya had accidentally done. If the student confused face was anything to go by, at least he thought it was a confused face. It is harder to read a bird's face than he thought it was. Maybe he should get classes from an animal expert while the students are out on their internships. Mirko. Midnight. For the other students' safety, teach your children some self-control. Present Mike exclaimed as this was the second time Izuku had made things harder for the other students. You really expect them to teach anyone self-control, let alone their own children? Aizawa said to his friend, raising an eyebrow at them. Yeah, I know, I realized what I said after a second of thinking on it. Present Mike admitted that what he just asked of the two women was unreasonable for them to pull off. Fortunately, the two women were restrained in advance this time before they could attack the two of them in the announcer booth. Well, at least Himiko cannot do anything too crazy, he said, making his friends slap themselves in the face, letting out a groan. Oh, how can what I say turn out badly? It is not like she can control another element to transform it into something worse, right? Present Mike said, raising a fair point, that is in the case of anyone not connected to Maple in any direct way. Well, that aside, it looks like Maple is having a hard time with those traps, just like the other competitors will be soon enough, he said as Maple triggered a few, one of them causing him to wince as he wanted to hold his own foot. UA Sports Festival racetrack, third-person POV, Maple and Pony getting their spilt off as Pony ran down one of the straight paths while Maple was forced to stay behind as she figured out a plan. Decided she needed to simply do this the slow and steady way. She transformed back to normal and began walking across the same straight path as Pony. Unfortunately, this meant that all the traps she either missed completely or pushed to trigger by the slightest of touches were triggered by Maple after resetting themselves. Maple had gotten her leg pulled out from under her, tripped on a raised rock, and almost slipped off the side when one of her feet got slathered with slime. If the traps were not bad enough, thanks to the cold winds, even those who were not cold-blooded suffered when traveling slowly through here. However, seeing how hard of a time she had balancing in these intense winds, she had no choice but to go into her half-transformation. A big mistake, as even though it helped to fix her natural clumsiness, it also made her susceptible to the cold, so her plan did not last long. Fortunately for her, help had arrived in the form of Himiko, who went back to normal to prevent herself from going cat mode, as she did not need the extra strength and reflexes to do this. Maple. Are you okay? Himiko shouted in worry as she saw Maple curled up after just transforming back to normal in front of her on this path she chose. The dog boy of Class 1B, as she was going to call him from now on, who she was going up against before, chose a different path. I can't go fast enough to get through here in my N-normal form to avoid the traps. But my T-transformed form would leave me too weak to the cold wind. Maple responded as clearly as she could while shivering. Indeed, Izuku had turned this into a frozen hell even without the traps already put there in advance. Normally her high body temperature in normal form would be enough to resist this level of cold along with Himiko easily. But as she said, with the traps and her physical abilities significantly reduced, not even she could do this in her normal form. It did not help that the armor was absorbing her excess body heat that normally she would not need, but in this situation would be quite helpful for her in getting through this. I have a plan, I just need you to be ready to transform, grab me, and jump with everything you have when I signal you to do so. Himiko said, giving Maple hope of passing through here and further into the competition. Gathering her strength since they were already at the halfway point, she got ready to aim her strongest punch where they were standing. Now! She told Maple, who transformed, grabbed her, and jumped all in the span of a second, allowing Himiko to unleash her punch. This destroyed half of not just the path they were on but the other two straight paths beside them, launching the two upward with Maple leaping over to the other side cleanly. Despite the few minutes Maple needed to recover from the cold, luckily for Shishida he had already finished crossing when Himiko unleashed her attack. Due to a combination of her physical training as well as her quirk making her body more naturally adaptable to other quirks, she could use up to 30% with no issue. Granted, it was her limit, so thanks to her pushing it earlier at 20% constantly. She now could not use her quirk again for a bit unless she wanted to break her arm. This meant continuing on the old-fashioned way. Behind them the rubble had broken apart and mixed with the blizzard, getting covered in a thin layer of white on the already white surface of them. So now the paths were not only reduced from 5 to 2, but there was also rubble being tossed around that others had to dodge while moving forward. Needless to say, when the other student would find out after the sports festival was over what these three siblings did to them all. Well, it would have been an absolute riot if these siblings did not end up scaring them all with the difference in their power later on in the competition. UA Sports Festival Arena Center Field, third-person POV, Present Mike was left speechless as the third sibling did end up adding to the elemental chaos by piggybacking off what Izuku did earlier. I told you not to jinx it with those siblings involved in this year's chaos. Aizawa said, snapping his fingers in front of Present Mike's face to get his attention. Getting his focus back, the voice hero put himself back together. Before speaking up again. Next time it looks like I am about to jinx it, do me a favor and punch me Shota. Present Mike asked his friend, as it turns out all three of those siblings are their own special brand monsters when it came to competing against them. Gladly, and I will hold you to that. Aizawa said, happy his friend would finally learn to stop testing fate. Moving on from the fiery hell and freezing hell, he turned his attention to the last obstacle that had stumped Todoroki and Mina so far. Though he doubted Midoriya would be troubled by it too much once he got a good look at it. Indeed, it looks like no matter the level of physical strength that got many this far, it is all meaningless if they do not have the brain power to figure this out. Present Mike said, pointing out how the muscle heads of the tournament were going to have it rough at the end. UA Sports Festival Racetrack, third-person POV, Todoroki and Mina, who made it over to the last obstacle, were needless to say annoyed by it, as both preferred to push through obstacles using mainly their quirks. There is nothing active on the other side moving, but from what I can tell based off of how the sound echoed when I punched it, there are multiple paths on each side. Mina said, removing her ear from the front of the door as she figured her ears could not pick up anything more of note. It was a useful skill she picked up due to her love of dancing and music, one that even she may not fully comprehend. It looks like to me, we have to answer puzzles to get further into this maze of doors. Todoroki told Mina, as he knew that mental challenges like this were sadly not his partner's strong suit. Working on the first puzzle, he had quickly figured it out, so they went through the now open door, seeing three possible new doors with a different puzzle each like the first three doors. You take one door and I take another door. Todoroki said as she nodded to him, going left while he went right. Due to them dividing tasks like this, they made it to the last set of doors just as Izuku had gotten to the third obstacle. However, there was an issue facing them now. They needed a key to open the last door. Scrambling to look everywhere for it, the two had come to a shocking realization. In their efforts to get ahead of everyone else, they had skipped an important part of this obstacle race that has now stopped them from getting through to the finish line. It was painfully ironic for them that their lead has now turned into the worst possible disadvantage they could get. Sadly, neither his ice nor her acid could break down the door. Defeated, they sat down backs against each other in exasperation. Too bad we can't just make a key. Wait, we can. Mina was complaining quietly one moment, then shouting the next, startling Todoroki. What do you mean we can make a key? He asked her, confused as to what she was talking about. All you need to do is fill it with ice, then use your fire to melt it a little. After that we can get a rough idea as to the shape of the key needed to open. We can make as many copies as we need till we find one the right size that will fit, she exclaimed, making Todoroki hesitant suddenly. This confused her greatly. What's the matter to do? Mina asked him, concerned about his sudden change in attitude. I can't use it, it's his fire. He said, thinking back to how the fire from his father was a curse, unlike his mother's blessing. Mina did not understand his explanation. He doesn't copy other people's quirks like Monoma, so what was he talking about? I don't quite know what you are talking about when you say, his fire, but I don't think you should be holding back. I mean, you are the one creating the fire, not someone else, so doesn't that make it your fire? She said, holding his hands that were shaking when he started taking about his fire half of his quirk. But had now seemed to calm down once she was done talking. I trust you, so please, even if it is only a little flame, we need you to do it. Mina told him as she took a breath with him to get him to focus. With a nod to her they got to work, and none too late as they heard what sounded like a large bird landing in front of the first doors, likely another competitor. After several minutes of making keys, Izuku Midoriya entered the space with them. After he put the key in the hole, he went through, closing the now open door before him. When it closed, it broke the key in half. They heard the sounds of shifting metal as the other half was sked into the other side, sounding like it got spit out. Then the lock made the same noises of shifting metal before it shifted again. This gave Mina and Todoroki the same idea after seeing it work normally. Fortunately for them, Mina could use her exceptional hearing to get the timing right after a few tries with icicles being used in the locks. Using the metal half of the key Izuku used that remained along with his own memory, Todoroki used his fire and ice to make as close to a replica as he could. Inserting it, he heard the lock twist open but waited for Mina's signal when it did fully open. Now! She shouted to him, letting him know it was time to do it. Making a larger icicle, he jammed it open a small crack just a half second after the lock began to reject the fragile ice key, so the lock was not fully in place yet. Mina used her acid on the partially opened door, as Todoroki covered them both in ice on one side of their bodies. Slamming into the door together, they managed to force it open, falling through, just as they heard another door open behind them. Gathering themselves together, they made it across the finish line together, expecting to hear second place. Shoto Todoroki and Mina Ashido have claimed third place together in a tie, folks. Present Mike announced, confusing them as to who beat Izuku and them to the finish line when they noticed, a grinning and clearly not exhausted Reina chilling out by herself, causing them to almost fall again out of shock. Soon more people trickled in, with only a few other pairs making it through together in ties. These people being Himiko and Maple claiming 7th place, 2 pairs of support course students for a total of 4 people, 2 claiming 21st place and the other claiming 26th place. Then came a 4-way tie for 15th place consisting of Tetsu, Achiko Uraraka, Kyoka Jiro, and lastly Nido Monoma. Looks like we had quite a few teams even before the second round had begun. That is quite impressive, people. Present Mike said as they had now reached the halfway point of entries into the next round. There were even some who, despite getting an early lead, began to fall behind due to the freezing bludgeoning hell that Izuku and Himiko had accidentally created together. For one of the top examples was Tsuyu Azui, who was in position to potentially claim a top 10 spot at the start, had barely claimed 20th place. Setsuna Tokage, who caught up to the 15th spot at first, ended up falling to a 23rd place finish. Though she was not cold-blooded like Tsuyu Azui or Maple in her transformed form, she was still essentially mammal-reptile hybrid. Meaning she was still affected by cold significantly more than the average person, even though they leaned to the mammal side ever so slightly more than the previous 2 mentioned. It did not help that the winds also made it a no-fly zone, which also contributed to slowing her down, as well as flying around in separated body parts was her fastest way of travel. Looks like quite a few of the support students, despite only having a month to do so, have made some impressive gear, allowing them to keep up with the hero course students. Present Mike exclaimed as he spoke a genuine fact. Though most could not keep up with the hero course students who have been getting physically conditioned for things like this. There were a good few who managed to create support gear that in combination with their quirks got them some solid placements among the list of competitors. And the general education department managed to get some in there as well. Now that is what I am talking about, folks. He added with glee as they managed to do quite well for themselves, even if most had doubts about trying to get into the hero course right now. Chapter 5 UA Sports Festival Arena Center Field, third-person POV. A few minutes after the last qualifying persons had gotten in, Midnight had gathered them all together while she sent the other students off. Taking over for Mike as Aizawa had pulled their friend aside to talk to them in private, since she could handle this next part herself anyway. Though it did not mean she would be bringing out her own co-host, Nizu said no initially when she asked before the festival began. But after present Mike running his mouth like he did, Nizu said they needed a distraction from it. So, Mirko, her very adorable and especially so when embarrassed wife, came onto the stage confident as usual, until Midnight gave her fluffy tail a playful little squeeze, almost earning a yelp. "Okay everyone, I hope you can still get up where it counts." Midnight questioned, liking her lips for effect as most of the boys went red-faced with a few of the girls joining them. "Now normally we would only give you all a 10-minute break before the next event begins. But due to the more challenging than originally designed obstacle course, you will all get 30 minutes to recover your stamina for this one," she said, making them feel relieved till she continued to talk, bringing back the tension. "'Cause after I explain the event and you get 5 minutes to choose your partner before your break will begin. And when it ends, I expect you all to move yourselves ball deep into this event," she said, making a small uproar among the crowd and causing the students to almost all go red in the face a second time. In said crowd, there was a section cut off from the others specifically for up till now too, but with Maple it had become 3 different cults sharing the section. It was made a little bigger than last year due to the newest cult. There was something amusing to see them taking advice from their seniors in the fields of cults about how to conduct themselves in public settings like this. Though they were referred to as cults by the public, they were legally classified as religions despite their fanatic approaches to worship. Though when you consider how insane and unstable the beginning of the quirk era was and still is, it made sense. If this meant rounding fanatics into bigger and easier to keep an eye on groups, then most governments did not mind so long as they did not break any laws. In fact, just like the hero agencies who got to buy seats in advance and got a separate parking area, so did they. Naturally there was still some old school religions from before the era of quirks, but due to quirks most religions had died out or had begun to greatly fade away in place of new ones centered around quirks. The oldest of the cults was naturally for Nizu, who called themselves Scholars of the Rat God. Fortunately when he told them no living human sacrifices they obliged. For any who knew this, both understood why he was okay with it, but was also terrified that he gave them a thumbs up to desecrate human corpses. The term Rat God was not a nickname the staff called him by for his ability to handle problems, that is for sure. Then the second oldest among them was Midnight own cult, whose name was so inappropriate that it must literally be censored in any place that the public can see it. It was obvious what they were about. The only trouble they had ever caused Nizu in the slightest was them wearing the bare minimum clothing required in public. Even then the animal waved it off as there were worse things in the world for children to see than a little bit of skin. This was why they, rather than a sound-dampening tent for any rituals like the others, had to put together a soundproof shed for better or worse. As well as advocate for quirk discrimination victims, even offering such people temporary homes till they find a more stable living situation. Like how Nizu cult was more about obtaining higher tiers of knowledge in whatever field they were specialized in, as well as assisting animal rights groups in protecting quirked animals from quirk labs across the country and a good portion of the world. Or how Midnight's cult, with a slightly less noble goal of seeking pleasure and free love while ironically assisting SXL/SLT victims. Not even Nizu can wrap his head around how they can do so as effectively as they do, but decided it is better not to waste time fixing something that was working just fine. Back to Midnight, she began her explanation of the next event that was to come. This year we are combining 2 previous events into a brand new one, Midnight said, getting the crowd excited at the mention of 2 old events with enough of a twist to be called a new event. This one is called Racing Pillars. The rules are rather simple. 2 competitors will form a team where one drives an electric chariot from our chariot race event in a previous year. As for the other competitor, they will have to stand on top of a pillar in the inner area of the track, and before any potential racers get any funny ideas, they cannot attack them as there will be a wall between the 2 groups of competitors. She said that as she saw a few competitors look sad at the idea of helping their partners from the chariots as they raced around. Mirko stomped hard, getting their focus again before she continued her wife's explanation of the event. "Alright, you little fluff ball, listen up. For every lap you successfully complete, your partner's starting pillar goes up by 5 feet. If your partner inside the walls touches the ground by falling off of the pillar, or the pillar they are standing on sinks into the ground, both of you are eliminated with your starting pillar being removed. Every 2 minutes the pillars will be lowered by 5 feet automatically thanks to Cementos. This means that for you to cancel out the height decrease you would need to complete 1 lap in 2 minutes. Not impossible but not exactly easy either. The following chart will display to you how the starting heights for the pillars are calculated based off the combined team's point values." Mirko said, wondering how her wife or present Mike could talk for that long without stopping. Point ranges, P points and FT feet, 10, 000, 000 P, 10, 000, 350 P, 100 feet, 600 P, 700 P, 80 feet, 505 P, 600 P, 70 feet, 405 P, 500 P, 60 feet, 305 P, 400 P, 50 feet, 255 P, 300 P, 40 feet, 205 P, 250 P, 35 feet, 155 P, 200 P, 30 feet, 105 P, 150 P, 25 feet, 15 P, 100 P, 20 feet. These points shocked the students as they had noticed the heights connected to them, especially the lowest points. This meant that those who did not make it past 100 points would be in significant danger, as they would only have 8 minutes of standing time to start with. As such, they would be forced to fight their ways up the others' pillars if their partners could not keep up with the fall of the pillars. However, they still did not know how the points for the individuals were calculated, so for all they knew this was just to scare a little with the 20 feet height. Now for the points you all earned based off where you placed in the race. Though we were quite surprised to see so many ties for the higher placing spots. Now without any further delays, here is how you scored and who seemingly got the major advantage for the second event. Midnight added, keeping an eye out for those who got the hidden message. Point placements for second event. Reina Lopez 10, 000, 000 P, Izuku Midoriya 350 P, Shoto Todoroki Mina Ashido 345 P, Jirota Shishida 335 P, Pony Tsunatori 330 P, Maple Usagiyama Himiko Toga 325 P, Fumikage Tokoyami 315 P, Mizo Shoji 310 P, Mei Hatsum 300 P, Reiko Yanagi 280 P, Momo Yaorozu 260 P, Tetsu Achiko Uraraka Kyoka Jiro Nido Monoma 255 P, Tenya Ida 235 P, Tsuyu Azui 230 P, Random Support Course Student A, Random Support Course Student B, 225 P, Setsuna Tokage 215 P, Random Support Course Student C, 210 P, Random Support Course Student D, 205 P, Random Support Course Student E, Random Support Course Student F, 200 P, Hitoshi Shinso 190 P, Mashireo Ojiro 185 P, Ibra Shiozaki 180 P, Random Support Course Student G, 175 P, Random Support Course Student H, 170 P, Random Support Course Student I, 165 P, Random Support Course Student J, 160 P, Random Support Course Student K, 155 P, Random Support Course Student L, 150 P, Random Support Course Student M, 145 P, Ijiro Kurishima 140 P, Shirhai Kurwaro 135 P, Random Support Course Student N, 130 P, Toguro Kamakiri 125 P, Hiryu Rin 120 P, Atsuka Kendo 115 P, Yui Kodai 110 P, Koji Koda 105 P, Hantasiro 100 P, Random Support Course Student O, 95 P, Random Support Course Student P, 90 P, Random Support Course Student Q, 85 P, Random Support Course Student R, 80p Rikido Sato 75p Senkaibara 70p Yosetsu Aways 65p Denki Kaminari 60p Juzo Hananuki 55p Kojiro Bando 50p Manga Fukidashi 45p Toru Hagakure 40p Kinoko Komori 35p Yuga Aoyama 30p Nairenjiki Shoda 25p, Random General Education Student A, 20p, Random General Education Student B, 15p, Random General Education Student C, 10p, Random General Education Student D, 5p. The massive differences in height and by extension time between the 10th placement ranges and the 5th placement ranges for the point totals were startling to say the least. Even though it was a mere 30 feet difference between bottom and middle placements. With 5 feet being lost every 2 minutes, that gave them a 12-minute difference for anyone trying stall on their pillars defending it. That was of course not even considering the differences between the even higher placement ranges on the list that went beyond 5th. Granted, the amount of points needed to reach them was quite large, so the students were curious how many would even end up forming teams to reach those advantages. Well, the non-hero course students anyway, as most of the hero course students had a rough idea of who would end up partnering with who. With that, you all have 30 minutes to rest, so find a partner and make a game plan. 'Cause once we have 32 people eliminated, the next event will begin after a lunch break. Mirko said, wishing internally that her wife would not try to cop a feel of her but on a public stage. Luckily Nizu did not allow cameras except the ones attached to phones in the stadium, but made sure to put a cell jamming signal in the stadium that completely disabled all non-registered phones while active. So, the only cameras were the ones controlled by UA that Power Loader had his students guiding, telling them when to SWCH to close-ups of Midnight's or Mirko face. As one can easily imagine, all hell had broken loose among the competitors down there scrambling to find someone to partner with. UA Sports Festival, in a small room, third-person POV, Aizawa, who had pulled his longtime friend Present Mike into the room a while ago, was currently talking it out with him. For their sake and not his, as to figure out how they were going to explain their CRP to Nizu without getting a temporary child-sized boot up his butt from his tiny boss. What the hell? Mike, Aizawa said, barely getting the words out with even a sliver of his usual calm in his current frustration with his friend. What has you so bent out of shape? Oh, I know it is that hobo cosplayer joke I made. Present Mike stated, more than asked, obviously trying to brush off this talk as quickly as possible. Grabbing his friend's arm as they tried to walk back to the booth saying they should hurry, Aizawa glared at him hard. I thought you got over what happened already after all of these years of being a hero. Aizawa said in a tone indicating he was now questioning his judgment. The incident he was referring to was shortly after they had graduated from UA together. After finding the villain who was responsible for killing their friend Oboro, Present Mike had confronted them to try and apprehend them. To call it a one-sided fight was an understatement, as they had been unable to hurt them in the slightest due to their opponent's mutant quirk making them immune to his sound attack. It was Aizawa who first got there to help him by taking down the villain while he called for an ambulance. The media arriving shortly after had been inquiring as to why Present Mike had failed when Aizawa stepped in and finished it right away. He had claimed that he merely jumped into the fight to finish off the villain, saying how he got them hurt because of his selfishness. This assistance from Aizawa had left a mark on the voice hero, as his friend had made himself look like an absolute BSTRD to save his reputation. Aizawa had always said he hated the limelight and the less annoyances he had to deal with like groupies like the other heroes, the more he could focus on actual hero work unlike them. For a while he had hated mutant quirks, as all he could think about when he saw one was the villain who killed his friend and got him to permanently damage his other friend's reputation in the eyes of the public. He eventually managed to push it down, as he knew it was not right to blame random people with a mutant quirk for that whole mess. But losing so one-sidedly to the Nomu, even though he knew it was just a genetically altered corpse, it felt like a repeat of his fight from back then. But much worse, as there were higher stakes involved at the time compared to his reckless actions as a young hero. I thought I did, but I was useless against that Nomu without my quirk, and all because the mutant quirks it had managed to physically overpower me. Present Mike said, remembering how he dodged his redirected sound attack by the smallest of margins. Only to get himself beaten senseless by it before it ended up tossing him into that building. I can't stack up to fighters like you or mutant quirks cause I rely on solely the power of my quirk to get me through my fights. He said, shaking before his friend pulled him into the same awkward hug he gave them years back in the hospital when he said he needed to tell the media the truth. Everyone has a weakness, but Oboro would never want you to cloud your judgment with self-pity. I think you need to step back for a while to clear your head. Aizawa said, stepping back as his friend showed he was clearly conflicted on what to do. I agree with you on that, though I understand it was something you did out of trauma, not ill intentions. I still cannot ignore it. Nizu said, making them turn to their boss in shock. Nizu had waited a few moments before he continued. Your comments earlier compared to the students without mutant quirks were on the borderline of discrimination. As a teacher, I cannot allow you to teach any of the students or continue to be the announcer for the rest of the events till you get over your issues. He said in his clear tone that always indicated that he meant business when he said something. They were about to protest when the small animal held out his hand to them to silence them. Do not worry, when it comes to protecting Maple and UA, I will have you stay on campus to do patrols. Mirko will fill in for you as the announcer for the rest of the sport festival, and All Might in his civilian form will teach English in your place as he is more than qualified when it comes to the language. Until you have been approved by a psychologist that you will not show such behavior again, you will not be allowed to teach. It is either this, or I fire you on the spot, and if lawsuits come against UA cause of you from this, I will throw you under the metaphoric bus to protect UA in order to keep the barely held together peace we currently have. It is up to you which I do. Nizu said, seeing for one of the very few and rare occasions of Eraserhead needing to be held back by present Mike instead of the other way around. I understand, thank you for this second chance, sir. Present Mike said, bowing his head solemnly at this without his usual vigor. As much as he appreciated his friend wanting to argue for him, the man knew that he crossed a line, almost resulting in dragging UA down with him for his actions that he knew as a hero he should not have done, let alone tolerated from others. Nizu let out a sigh of relief, snapping them both to attention to look to him, seeing one of his few genuine smiles and not the fake one he wears as principal daily. With how very little allies, I am glad to still have you by my side. Keeping all I have done to try and push society to do better on my own is impossible until we deal with the current Hero Public Safety Commission as a whole. Even then, with All for One making his return, I have no time to focus on the future as the present is far too perilous for us to even have a chance with him still around. Nizu said, reminding the two heroes of the real danger behind the scenes that the public does not know about yet. Present Mike was told to join Power Loader and the other support course students in the monitoring room as they could not let the public see him here at the stadium after the SWCH. So instead of playing with his thumbs all day, Nizu decided to use his in-depth knowledge of the broadcasting equipment to assist his colleague and their students with making sure the show runs smoothly. Chapter 6 UA Sports Festival with Nizu. Before speaking with Present Mike and Eraserhead, third-person POV, as the first event had kicked off, Nizu was about to sigh as he saw a repeat of the endurance race from the quirk apprehension tests. But then something pink caught his eye. It seemed that young Todoroki had teamed up with Ishido once again. Perhaps we will see a new couple be born before summer training even hits us this year. Nizu asked himself out loud, happy for the distraction after his previous arguments with the school board on this. Even if the students all refused to participate, the subtle threat from the HPSC to deem the school unsafe for non-hero course students tied Nizu hands via a spineless UA school board. Most hero schools did not have general education courses as large as UA, as it was usually deemed as backup hero course student stock if some ever dropped out for one reason or another. So even though not all general education students would be cut, of the 6 classes only 2 would remain as the traditional backup pool to choose from. This was sadly enough to force the school board's hand to make all the students to participate a couple weeks back. Despite him telling them he could do something about it, but in the end, they were businessmen and women, not heroes and heroines. Present Mike, who was the homeroom teacher for one of the general education student classes, agreed with Nizu expanding it like he did. As the UA mark on their records along with the tougher-than-normal classes saw most off to university or high-ranking colleges eventually seeing bright futures. To prove the point, one of the former graduates were the UA General Education course was Japan's ambassador on Island. Who, mind you, was the one maintaining Japan's hero support gear contracts with them for a lot of heroes all across Japan. Just a little below 40% of Japan total heroes, to be more precise, according to the statistics, when he tried to argue back with the HPSC, who did not take her seriously. Both because she was quirkless as well as being a graduate from the general education course. Which, to his amazement, and not in a good way mind you, they had seriously thought anyone with a quirk as well as from a more focused education could do better. The second one he had to give to them for thinking, as it was a logical point to a certain degree, but the quirkless one was a whole other debate altogether for a whole other day. Seeing the teenage duo do something as crazy as surfing on acid to get past the robot and following 2 obstacles. His amusement and the others with him when they saw the students realize they needed a key from behind them on the obstacle track. With him drinking tea and eating biscuits were the leaders of the cults, as he found their company much more enjoyable than those cowards in suits. To his left at the semicircle table was the leader of the cult following him. They referred to him as the Cryptic One within the cult, as that was the title of the leader. His actual name was Peter, and he was an old man of silver hair due to his old age, with goatee and connecting mustache. Their eyes were a deep green that had a sharp look to them, fitting for a former Cambridge professor. Dressed in his grayish robes with a hood that Peter had behind his back at the moment, it was opened up right now though, revealing the black dress briefs, shiny black dress shoes, and a white long-sleeve dress shirt with a black sleeveless vest over it. Next to Peter were the 2 newcomers, Alucard Bell and Emily Bell, who were effectively both the leaders of the cult. Their family history dated back to Europe, as their ancestors came to Japan after the vampire quirks hunts began, before Hero Society was an official thing, stabilizing everything. When Maple had shown up, this family along with it business essentially founded the cult, as they found the uncle and niece duo were wearing simple plain bright red long-sleeve dress shirts, with the uncle wearing white briefs while she wore white shorts. They wore red dress shoes as well. Emily had black hair and green eyes, while her uncle was cleanly bald and had the same green eyes as his niece. Most of the followers wore red, in fact, for the obvious reason that they were there to assist other. Finally, beside Nizu on his right was Clarabelle, a half-Japanese half-American woman with blonde hair and hazel brown eyes. She was the leader of the cult connected to Midnight. The cultist in their group referred to her as Lady Asmodeus, like how the other 3 had titles. Right now, she was cooing at the sight of the 2 students together, rubbing her thighs together in what the others assumed was a vivid daydream. Those 2 are going to make lots of cute babies together, I already know it, she said, liking the biscuit end facing her mouth before biting down on it hard with a smile. It did not help that Clarabelle, as usual, was wearing a blue and white sports br with no shirt, along with a pair of dark blue walking shorts with nothing underneath that she was prepared to pull down. Then kick them aside at a moment notice for an org if the others ever started one out of the scheduled masses of their group. Peter laughed it off, as this was the usual for his fellow cult leader, who he was known as one of the most outrageous women across Japan, excluding her goddess Midnight, that is. Maybe so, but one of the 2 has to pop the question first. Clara, Peter said, seeing her pout at him for popping her bubble. Emily, however, rather than looking at the romance of this scenario, she was more focused on what followed after with the last obstacle. Nizu, noticing this, encouraged her to speak up, as it was clear she was hesitating to say something. Well, I mean, is it not a bit much to exhaust their concentration with the 2nd and 3rd obstacles to end it at giant puzzle game? She said, narrowing her eyes at the pink girl struggling through all of them. She did. Though that was more obvious due to her intelligence rather than her mental exhaustion, so her smarter partner had managed to clear them relatively quickly until you made it so anyone who managed to skip all the obstacles would be punished for it, didn't you? She asked the mouse principal, who merely chuckled his response. Alucard simply sighed at this, as he felt the struggle was necessary to weed out those who relied solely on their physical power. That was when he noticed how present Mike was commenting in an almost derogatory way towards mutant quirk users. My apologies, Nizu, as we are new here, but I cannot help but feel present Mike is looking down on the mutant quirk users by referring to them as literal animals. He said, unable to hold his peace any longer over the matter, literally shouting before him. Nizu, barely holding back a sigh at this turn of events, knew he would have to deal with it before the next event. Sending Midnight a message through her earpiece that a 30-minute break would be in order to allow a clean SWCH of Mirko and present Mike, I assure you I am about to deal with that little issue. On a different note, though it looks like someone who was underestimated by their classmates had just claimed herself first place. Nizu said as he recalled her quirk description. Yes, for a teenager something like her power would be easy to forget about compared to the flashy forces of nature amongst her classmates. But for a pro hero, it was quite easy to see how deadly such an ability like hers could be if used to its full potential. Unfortunately for the two lovebirds, it seems Izuku had beaten them as he followed the proper path. Unlike them who decided to recklessly rush ahead. He said, enjoying the shocked looks on their faces as they saw they had claimed third place together, not second. UA Sports Festival Endeavor, third-person POV, the day to show the world the great power that he cultivated over the years, and his son had finally come for the pro hero who looked forward to this for months. Yet after the previous attack, though he would never look weak by saying it out loud to anyone, he wanted his son to not fight today and hide. After seeing the masterful tactics from the enemy on how they expertly divided the forces of the heroes in Mustafu during their attack. So possibly broadcasting his son's current limits was not a safe move for their overall safety. So as a result, he seemed to have surprised his son by telling them to hold back so as to fight at most half strength but try to stick to a fourth. At first his son had tried to rebel against this order from him, but after yelling at him a question that he never thought he would ask his son, they agreed to it at the time. The question they yelled at their son was along the lines of if he wanted his sister Fuyumi to see a news report of him dying to the same villains that attacked UA before. So, when the event started, and his son had frozen the other contestants in place at the start, skipping ahead, he felt it was still going well. At first, he questioned why his son had bothered bringing that pink girl with them. But then he saw how they made it look like they needed her help to get past the robots, so he was satisfied. That girl though has potential, perhaps I should offer her an internship to see if she could make a good sidekick for Shoto. Endeavor asked himself out loud as he leaned against the railing in front of him. Then the camera shifted to the mutant quirk users along with the useless prattling of the loud idiot who decided to waste his time with their tasteless nicknames for jokes. However, a sight which shocked him more than any others in that race, even when his son was revealed to have skipped getting a necessary key to pass, it was the quirk of one Izuku Midoriya. Seeing the young man turn into a near replica of the giant ice bird he saw attacking UA from the distance that day rattled him ever so slightly. Is that boy the same as the maple girl? If so, then what the hell is that rat thinking by keeping such dangerous quirk users at a hero school? He asked himself out loud before slamming his hands down on the railing in a small burst of flame and anger at the idea of Nizu putting his son in danger like that. This scared the people near him, but he did not care for these noisy sheep opinions. After a few minutes of calming down and thinking, he was able to look at the quirks of the two siblings objectively. Though he hated to admit it, he could not deny that unlike the UA assault incident and the Maple Girl earlier incident, both were now in clear control of their quirks. Granted, he had to admit though they both had powerful quirks, it was clear the Maple Girl, though having the ability to motivate his son, she lacked the bare minimum DSPLN required of a hero. Unfortunately, the Midoriya boy was a boy and therefore could not produce children with Shoto. Or else he would have considered them a possible wife to produce a stronger and smarter hero than even Shoto could become. This in turn would have allowed his grandchildren an even better chance at surpassing All Might than him or his son ever had. The power the Himiko girl displayed was on par with All Might's own power. In fact, he would have gone as far as to say her quirk was the same as the blonde idiot. Perhaps she is. No, if All Might had a daughter enrolled in UA, he would have already announced it as the symbol of peace to make people feel safer. Endeavor said to himself, trying to persuade himself that his idea was wrong. Though a part of him could not help but cling to the idea, especially when he saw her put on a ridiculous, arrogant, and most of all a non-serious smile like All Might always did whenever he beat a villain. If she did turn out to be related to All Might, then he would have to remove her from the possibility of marriage despite her powerful quirk, as it was clear All Might DNA produced another joke of a hero that always seemed on the edge of making a joke about how much stronger they are than the other heroes. However, when he noticed how the pink girl had managed to convince his son somehow to use his fire, he could not help but grin ear to ear. Even if he could not hear the audio of their conversation, it was clear that her words could impact his son. Her current goofiness aside, it is clear she understands she needs to keep pushing herself to be a great hero. Looks like I really will need to send her an invitation for the internships after all. He mused to himself as he saw potential in her between her drive and powerful yet flexible in terms of usage quirk. It did annoy him a little his son had only claimed third place, but he supposed this was the price he had to pay for telling his son to hold back most of his power so as not to reveal their hand to the villains. UA Sports Festival Arena Center Field, third-person POV. Unfortunately, Midnight had to send Mirko to assist Aizawa with the play-by-play, something the crowd did not question fortunately. Alright people, before we show the pairs and their points, I have a small announcement to make. Mirko said, unsure from the booth before she began humming and writing something down. Not realizing her mic was on the whole time, she tried to just go back to it. Aizawa said in a monotone voice before listing off the plate number. As an embarrassed cult member made their way through the stands apologizing to the others, Mirko began pouting at this. Why did you cut me off? Mirko asked in frustration, getting an annoyed sigh from the man for her amateur job. First off, everyone heard you scribbling down notes from what Power Loader told you over your earpiece. Secondly, you took too long to tell them all. Leave the announcement to me while you just stick to commentating on the fighting, okay? Aizawa told her as he just barely dodged a roundhouse kick that just swept past his head. With this little show getting a good laugh out of the audience. Midnight went to showing the scores before her wife accidentally swore on global television, not that it would be too much of a problem, but still less paperwork in the end was still less paperwork. Chariot Pillar Point Total, SCS Support Course Student, GS General Education Student, Reina Lopez Shurhai Kurwaro 10,000, 135p Shoto Todoroki Mina Ashido 690p Jirota Shishida Izuku Midoriya 685p Pony Tsunatori Himiko Toga 655p Fumikage Tokoyami Mizo Shoji 625p Maple Usagiyama Momo Yaorozu 585p 07, A. Tetsu Nido Monoma 510p 07, B. Kyoka Jiro Achiko 510p Tenya Ida Tsuyu Azuri 465p Random SCS A Random SCS B 450p Random SCS C Random SCS E 410p Random SCS D Random SCS F 405p Kinoko Komori Mei Hatsum 335p Atsuka Kendo Setsuna Tokage 330p 15, A. Ijiro Kurishima Mashireo Ojiro 325p 15, B. Manga Fukudashi Reiko Yanagi 325p 17, A. Random SCS I Random SCS L 315p 17, B. Random SCS H Random SCS M 315p 17, C. Random SCS J Random SCS K 315p Random SCS G Random SCS N 305p Denki Kaminari Hitoshi Shinso 250p Toguro Kamakiri Hiryu Rin 245p 23, A. Yuga Aoyama Ibra Shiozaki 210p 23, B. Yui Kodai Hantasiro 210p 25, A. Random SCS O Random SCS R 175p 25, B. Random SCS P Random SCS Q 175p Rakido Satos and Kaibara 145p Narenjiki Shota Koji Koda 130p Juzo Hananuki Yosetsu Aways 120p Kojiro Bondo Toru Hagakure 90p 31, A. Random GES A Random GES D 25p 32, B. Random GESC Random GESB 25p Everyone in all courses was surprised to see the usual duo of Maple and Himiko not working together, looking at them and their partners. All Maple could do was laugh and rub the back of her head as for once in her life she could read the metaphoric room. They were all in properly. I just really wanted to have fun playing against Pony and Hime. Maple said, unsure of how else to answer it. Momo chuckled as she shook her head at the ever-so-Maple-like response to the unspoken question. To make sure these three don't get out of hand in the fighting round, I partnered up with Maple to help keep the chaos to a minimum. Momo said, speaking the truth, as she really did worry about Maple taking a fight too far in her excitement. No one batted an eye at the two people who both got third place working together, or the others like them claiming the same spot coming together to double their points. Not to mention seeing so many people in the top 20 of the 64 of them pairing up together for the same reason of higher points doing the same. After all, it was logical thinking that the more points you had the better your advantage would be for this event. But then what really shocked most of the audience was so many support course students getting higher scores than a lot of the hero course students. Those who knew better, such as most of the pro heroes and the support companies, knew how easy it was to use high-quality support gear as a substitute for a good quirk. It also helped to back up their opinions, as most of the support course students seemed to have worked out partnerships in advance based off of the teamwork from the obstacle course. In the past, the HPSC would have been upset at the sight of seeing so many non-hero course students making it to the second round. However, unlike past years, this year was the first to have over 20 extra spots than there were hero course students. So, they had no problems with this many fools make it this far into the sports festival. No, the reason they were upset now was that so many hero course students were getting outdone by the support course students. In their opinion, quirks, especially powerful and flashy ones, were supposed to be superior to support gear. But seeing so many students place highly solely due to their gear instead of their quirks sent a bad message in their opinion. It sent the message that anyone can be a hero despite their quirk. This was not something they believed in, mainly because of the flashy and powerful quirks they try to focus on. Focusing on such quirks helped to distract the public from the minor mistakes that were made by them and heroes on a daily basis, as well as the major ones. As for the school board's take on this, it was the same as Nizu, though they lacked the courage to go up against the HPSC. They, like Nizu, believed in their students. They could not care less about the quirk someone has or doesn't have, so long as they were a boon to UA, which Nizu's suggestion to not just expanding the general education course, but to also let quirkless kids apply to the hero course, allowed them to scoop up plenty of talent they would have had to give away to other schools. Because of Nizu, they had a direct connection with an ambassador on Island, which was, as said before, was a great boon for them in terms of reputation as well as connections. It was because of these connections that they were able to get their AI for the school made by some of the scientists of Island in the first place. Though they were proud of their hero course students, as businessmen and women they were much prouder of the support course. As the support course led to literal business talks with companies for school sponsorships and future hero costumes for the hero course being made by the best companies at cheaper rates than most other hero schools. So, to see them and their inventions catch so much attention this year was something they quite liked. With most of the HPSC board members still fuming in their chairs back at their main headquarters, Nizu along with UA board eagerly awaiting to see what came next in the sports festival. The crowd was about to burst at the seams from waiting for the action to kick off. Midnight had begun gathering the students in place to begin. Just like in a typical race, those with a higher spot would start closer to the starting line. Cementos had raised the pillars slightly earlier so that numbers and in some cases, letters as well were added to the columns. The circular center was divided into 10 sections, with pillars falling into one of the 10 categories placed in each section. First, he raised the walls after letting the pillar people get in the center, that way the racers would not know where their partners were in the middle or who was near them. Once everyone was on their pillars, he raised them accordingly. With the wall standing at 120 feet tall, no one could see the highest pillar. With that done and the racers in place, the 10-second countdown commenced. Alright racers, remember no lethal force when using your quirks, same goes for the students on the pillars. And keep in mind, once we are down to 16 teams the race will come to an end. Now if my little chocolate bunny would do the honors. Midnight said, enjoying the embarrassed sputtering of her wife in the announcer booth for a few seconds before they calmed down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. Mirko announced as the chaos began with, not who people thought it would be.